Hi all. My name's Ben Davis-Thompson. I work for Disability Sport Wales, so I'm a Disability Sport Development Officer from Swansea. What we're looking at today is just a bit of a presentation on general disability inclusion, but we do a focus on autism. And it's just really to ask a few questions about athletics and officiating, coaching, and really what we could do to encourage changes in the process where it's necessary, and just looking at it from the ground up really. We've got a little bit of a crib sheet of key messages at the start. So what we tend to do within Disability Sport Wales is say we want to focus on the functional approach. So if we focus on the ability of what people can do, it's much easier for us to make changes and really work from first principles, and it is to find out what someone can't do and then try and whittle it back. It's more of a negative way of looking at things. So focusing on what somebody can do, and I'll keep coming back to this in a way, but a lot of the time that's about asking the person and going straight to the source and finding out, where they think things can be changed. We've also got be creative and innovative. In that, I think a lot of the time, barriers in sport can be, you probably all might agree, we're all a bit cash-starved. Funding processes are very small. Sometimes it's hard to talk about long-term change. Sometimes we can only really look at 1 year or 2 years maximum in some of our development programs. So a lot of it is about trying to do what we already do, really, which is work with what we've got. We've got Be Brave here. I think that's a recognition that it can be embarrassing and it can be really upsetting to think of getting something wrong. And I think that can be a really big contributor to us sometimes doing nothing, or thinking that a situation is okay, or maybe not making the changes that we think we should do in a situation. So a lot of the time it's about confronting the elephant in the room, and if something's not quite right, talking about what we can do to change it. Because it's always the case that somebody will want you to have tried to change something, even if there was an awkward moment, rather than if you were to avoid that potentially embarrassing moment for yourself, potentially at their expense. So it's about all of us being braver really, and perhaps as well making sure that there is no stigma, and we're trying to get rid of it, and we're not perpetuating it. We've got here, have confidence in the tools in your toolkit. I'm afraid there are no toolkits that we're providing. This is more about all of you with all of your combined experience of officiating or coaching, being athletes. So it's about you using your experience to make changes where they're necessary, and just applying disability to that as a new aspect, or an aspect you want to do more on. And then don't ever be afraid to ask. So that's part of the Be Brave one. We do courses in primary schools of disability inclusion training, and we always talk to the young people, year 5, year 6, about what can you do to kind of include somebody who's got this disability or that disability. And they talk about the teacher, and they talk about mum and dad, and they talk about Google, probably WebMD, things like that. But ultimately, it's often about talking to the person who has the disability and saying, what can we change here to make sure that you're included best? So again, it's about cutting to the chase and being a bit more head-on. So, just as a bit of a justification, I don't think that any of you need any encouragement for this. 23% of the working age population in Wales consider themselves to have an impairment. If we look at kind of how those figures kind of rack up, that's about 1 million people in the UK who have a disability. So this isn't a group of people that we can exclude here. We need to make sure that, as well as all of the protected characteristics, everyone is taken into account in our decisions. 1 in 8 of the Welsh population have not reached level 1 of basic literacy skills. So if we're thinking about accessibility, a lot of people are excluded all the time in a lot of things that we do. I think all of us make assumptions sometimes that people have got the same level of access to things that we do, whereas often they don't. Autism currently affects 1 to 2% of the UK population. So the breakdown of those figures, well, it's just here actually, sorry. It's 2 for every 100 adults. So if you like, 1 in every 50 adults is affected by autism. And then for children, it's 1 per 100, so around 1%. So something that affects a big population here. So what this slide is talking about here is meaningful inclusion. We do a lot of teaching courses as far as clubs go, and also secondary schools and colleges. And the biggest barrier that we sometimes have is that somebody is included in PE, but it's not in a meaningful way. They're given an activity that is a bit of a stopgap. It's something that they can do at the same time, But if you were to then take a step back and say, well, hang on a minute, what have you been spending the year doing? You see something that was very disjointed and just a bit of a bolt-on added after the fact. So that's why it's so important that we make sure that someone is considered as to what they can do, thinking about that functional approach. And then whatever our curriculum is, whatever our training program is, whatever our event is that we're running, we make sure then that is tailored towards them. So this is really part of the age-old problem of a lot of our structures, whether they be sports or competitions or processes or rules, they're really built up in quite an exclusionary way, just because in some ways we were far less aware of certain things, certainly invisible disabilities for that matter, and they haven't really moved with the times sometimes, and it's really up to us as people on the ground to recognise where that's the case, and to be able to either go back and change the rule book a little bit, or to challenge it for those who can. And I've got a few notes here, so I've got to be honest, those have actually jumped off the other slide, so okay. Why do you do athletics? What's your prime kind of drivers for that? So I've got a few here. Can we just have a hands up? It's probably going to be for a lot of you. Who does it for fun, or who got involved in athletics for fun? All right, we've got a few here. Thank you very much. So quite a few for fun. I think probably most of you really. Did any of you do it for a social opportunity? Hands up. So there might be one, two. I got involved in sport for social opportunity. Thank you for the support. This might be a little bit more going towards it with officials. Hands up who maybe got involved in athletics for competitive opportunities. That was one of their primary drivers. So there's a few people here too. We've got other skills that we've got listed here. So getting kind of employability up, working towards things like your own self-confidence, well-being, personal challenge. When we're talking about meaningful inclusion, what we can't do is shut down any of these. So if we're adapting something so that someone can take part in a certain way, we can't make sure that suddenly it's not social or suddenly it's not fun. And that's when some of the examples of what we can do, some of our solutions have to be looked at. If we give an example perhaps with autism of sensory overload, if we have somebody who needs a quieter space to work in, and we provide them with that, but as a result they become ostracised from the rest of the people taking part, and we don't provide them with other opportunities, over time they might become less connected and become less confident around other people in their field. So it can be really important to think about what people's motivations are to do sport, and making sure that when we make changes, not only do they work functionally to include everybody, but they don't then knock away some of the things that might be quite important to them. Right, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here. We've got a bit of an activity inclusion model here. We've got a little bit of equality versus equity. So, hands up if you've seen this before, just so I can kind of work out how long to spend on this. Okay, so thank you everyone. Hands down. If you didn't put your hand up, you've condemned us all to a slightly longer celebration of this. Right, so what we've got here, we've got people on the left who are viewing a game, and they've all been given a box. Person on the left, their kind of characteristic, if you like, or their privilege is that they're quite tall, so they've got a good view of it. Person in the middle has got a fairly good view. It might be slightly impeded, but it's all right. Person on the right doesn't really have a view at all. Now, just a show of hands, everybody. This is kind of my way of kind of getting some engagement with you guys. Hands up who thinks the person on the right is having a good time, having a good experience. No controversy? No. I think so. The person on the right there doesn't have a view of the pitch. Is everyone being treated equally? Hands up there. Yeah. Equally. Yeah. Are people being treated equally on there? Hands up. Well, no hands up. Would anyone like to say why people aren't being treated equally?
Well, they still don't have the opportunity, but yeah.
Well,
It's equal because everyone's been given the same box. Everyone's got the same size box. It's fair.
yeah.
It's not equitable, but it's equal.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, you've had a really good conference for 2 days and I'm engaging you all in wordplay at the end. I would say that everyone is being treated equally there. Everyone's been issued a box, that's great. Probably not everybody needs that box, but everyone has that equal support. The other word that we're looking for is about equity and fairness. Is everyone being treated fairly? Hands up if you don't think so. Are people being treated unfairly, if you like, as far as their experience goes?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, hands down, that's great. There's no trickster here, no trick moves here. Yes, that's a fairly unfair opportunity because the person on the left there, they naturally can see everything and don't need any support, but they're getting some support. The person on the right, they're getting the same level of support and they don't have a view. So really what we want is we want to make sure that even if we treat people unequally, even if we give people extra support and extra consideration, we want it to be fair. Does that make sense? All right, brilliant. Right, we're going to go on to a few scenarios. Now these are based around autism, these scenarios, but for all of these I think we can think about different disabilities that it all apply to. You are all the experts when it comes to athletics, so I will be kind of pulling on all of you a little bit for if you can think of an experience that you've had that might be similar, but also if you can think of what the barrier is, that's the two questions, and the second thing would be what we can do about that barrier. So think of yourself in the context of an event or a club environment, supporting people. You see this taking place, what would you do about it, and do you recognise what the problem is? Just a second bullet point here. We've got a definition here for what autism is, and for those of you who might not be completely aware there, it's about how a person communicates with and relates to other people and how they experience the world around them. That's a very broad scope, and it's very different for every different person. So that's why if we take that functional approach and find out what somebody can do, how it affects them, that's where we're going to have a lot more success in opening things up for them, or just not discriminating against them, just by keeping things the way that they've always been. Right, okay, so first one here. This pertains to social interaction and verbal communication. So I'll just read it out here. John, an adult with autism, is arriving at a competition venue and is waiting to register himself. There is a long queue forming, and John is stood at the side of the queue fidgeting whilst other competitors are being registered. Does anyone want to be brave and tell me what they think might be an issue here, what the barrier might be? Yep.
The concept of waiting and time. People with autism, we don't understand the concept of, why is everything late, why is it not on time, why is it like this. So that's probably why it's fidgeting, because he's feeling anxious, not quite understanding that there's a queue, because there's a lot of people, but for autistic people, we just simply just don't understand that. So again, that's the barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a process that there's an understanding problem there. If we're going to talk about assumptions and generalisations, it might be quite offensive. British, we're pretty good at queuing, right? But there's an assumption there that everybody knows how queuing works, and queuing can work very differently. And you only need something to throw somebody off to then make it a barrier so that they can't access it anymore. What about fidgeting? Has anyone all got any ideas of what the fidgeting might be showing us, displaying to us? Yeah. So fidgeting can be, not always, but it can be a distress behaviour. It can also be a coping mechanism. So in the same way, somebody who is fidgeting might be showing some early anxiety, early distress, but it also might be something that they use to try and temper that stress and to cope. It's something that they can control. Right, so we've got a barrier here there may be a process reason, in that for an understanding point of view, John doesn't know how to get through that queue. Could anything else be a barrier? What if John understands the queue? Is there anything else that could be affecting John? Any ideas? Yep.
Maybe the fact that sort of has to talk to other people he doesn't really know. I know sometimes, not for all autistic people, but for others that can be very demanding for them, and you might not really want to look up to someone they don't really know, and talk to them, be able to communicate with them without feeling awkward.
Yeah, absolutely. So if John's had an experience where every time he speaks to another person, he experiences barriers, or he experiences some kind of negative response, or he feels like people aren't quite engaging, that something might not be quite right, it's going to be an additional ask for him, and out of his comfort zone perhaps, to be there talking to somebody he might not know about something he doesn't fully understand perhaps. So, you know, communication could be a really big issue there. That might have been overwhelming. An example here is that earlier on, about an hour before we started, I went just into the other room to look through some notes, and I thought this is a nice quiet environment. I was caught in there, kind of doing some looking at the notes, and whilst I was in there, they started playing some kind of progressive kind of trance music or drum and bass while I was stuck in the chairs and things. And luckily they know that that's my kind of vibe when I want to prepare for a presentation. But that's not going to be the environment that is conducive to everybody, is it? For all of us, if we look at these lights, another part of autism is that we can be overstimulated and understimulated by different lighting, ambient lighting around us. And it can be about sound, in that we can have overload from there being too much sound or it being too quiet for that matter. So it could actually be the atmosphere of that front area. My father used to bring in some family there. He uses a hearing aid, and if he's not in a room with carpet and plaster as opposed to metal, he can't hear anything because it's reverberating. Maybe he can cope with that, and maybe he can work around that. But if that then starts to become too much for him, you would see exactly what we're seeing here: distress behaviours, overload. He might not come along. He might want to leave. So yeah, that's fantastic. I think I've got a few little bullet points in here. So it could be the understanding of the process. It could be confidence to approach, which is actually what we kind of had earlier on. And it could be intimidation, so a very new environment. It could also be a change of person, because we're going to get onto this, but it could be a change in routine, in that John might be used to there being a certain person at reception, and that person not being there has thrown everything up in the air. And in some ways that's to do with problem solving and being able to predict how the world works. Sorry, I keep moving around. If we can understand what a change means for us, it's not distressing, is it? And within politics at the moment, there are distressing things happening. If we don't know what's going to happen, it is distressing, and that will cause anxiety for all of us. So if John doesn't understand what it means that there's a different member of staff there, that could be triggering that for him. I've covered environment. What could we do to try and help John? If you're aware, someone's reported to you, oh, John, that new person that came along last week, he's in reception, but he hasn't come through to the queue. Can you go and help him out, or what should we do? Any ideas? And bear in mind, be brave. Don't be afraid to get anything wrong when you give an answer to this. Any thoughts?
Can pre-warn people of the situation.
Yep. So who would you pre-warn?
What the athlete who has autism. The simple thing is just picture the person who actually be greeting you.
Yeah. So it could be that our reception staff, that we could pre-warn them that, well, for example, it could be general education. If a reception staff member sees behaviour that could indicate distress, under any circumstance, what should they do? Engage. That's what we would normally do. So perhaps that's just a lack of education about, what a distress behaviour might look like. It could be that we kind of chat to the other athletes, couldn't it? If all the athletes are aware that John comes along to the session and that John experiences autism, if they see him not participating in the queue, what will they probably do? Probably support. Yeah, absolutely. I think probably one of the main things that we think about there is, if I just really quickly flick back. Now, I didn't go on to this far one on the right. That is a chain link fence. It's performing the same purpose as our wooden fence, and it's keeping people back, which I guess what that was for. It's a boundary. What's the difference between our chain link fence and our wooden fence, anybody? What's the improvement?
Everybody can see.
Everyone can see. So what have we removed? The barrier. So, that is the ideal one, isn't it? Unless we've got an unlimited supply of boxes for the stadium. The perfect solution would be to, on the right, make sure that the barrier doesn't exist in the first place anyway. Can any of you think, for John, queuing is the problem? How could we try and eliminate that barrier?
Doesn't have to queue, just be registered before he gets there.
Yeah, absolutely. So he could pre-register, John could walk straight through. Maybe he'd kind of have some identifier from the club. Maybe it might be that he's known to the reception staff. Maybe he's comfortable to wear a sunflower autism band, so that people are aware without having to educate everybody. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts of what we could do? So we could somehow give them a cue jump such that people understand that. Anything else?
If you know there's a change in personnel, like pre-warn him of who it's going to be.
Yeah, so that little step where perhaps people maybe don't need to be introduced to different members of staff, well, what a great way, in a way, to make sure that people will remember what they need to do than to actually introduce them to John as a person. If you send an email around a leisure centre, there's no disrespect to leisure centres here, but they're very busy places, and you mention a person, you say that it might be an issue on Tuesday night, they come to this session. Hands up if you think there's a possibility that that's going to get lost in the post, and that's not going to have a huge effect. I think, yeah, very much so. If you, take the opportunity without kind of using too much of John's time, but just to introduce him as you go to different reception staff, just to then make sure that he feels comfortable, that would be a perfect solution. And then the only other one that I'll throw in here is, I think we've got it written down, so I'll jump back onto the slide. So there we are. Oh, no, okay. It's about having a buddy. So what if someone from the club were to buddy up with John? And, John might like routine, so he might always arrive at 10 to 6. He's your most reliable club member, perhaps. But if he's always arriving at 10 to 6, why not have another club member arrive at that time too? And they can walk with John through there. Do you remember me talking about things that we don't want to eliminate, whilst we're trying to solve a problem? Not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Can you think of any downside to if we were to have John skip the queue and just go straight through, other than feeling like a VIP and engaging the anger of everyone in the room? But
this is
yeah.
this is a question. Sorry. This
No,
is a
please.
question
I'll jump there and there. Yeah.
This is a question I had before we started this. We've got a couple of kids with autism in the club, and one of them was just getting into competing, and we kind of went up with the athlete for this first competition, and then spoke to the official to say and let them know. But then coming back from it, I wasn't sure myself whether I was doing a good thing or a bad thing by making them aware, or then I almost labelling him as something different. I thought about it afterwards, and I wasn't sure what I should have done.
It's a minefield, isn't it? This kind of like the self-doubt of not wanting to embarrass another person or embarrass ourselves. One thing I think that we'd probably say is that what shouldn't exist anyway is the stigma. And if we don't make something a big deal, then it isn't a big deal. In the same way that if somebody should meet somebody because they're going to have an impact on their event, and they're allowed to do that, that should happen under all circumstances. It's not different because it's disability. But I completely agree. You don't want someone to feel highlighted or pulled out, and I think that in some ways it's about doing things in a discreet way as well, such that, for example, John feels comfortable in that example. But yeah, I think that people will always appreciate that, and it's always the right thing to do. And over time, there is no stigma, because actually it's treated in the same way as if somebody had to go up and say, I've got an insulin needle here, if something were to happen, there isn't really any shame there, so there's a lot of other invisible things that we don't have that hesitancy about. So, but yeah, very human, yeah, to have that. Right, so we've gone on that one case sample. Have we got anything else that we wanted to chat about on this example?
I can't remember the question.
That's fine. There's not many of us here. I don't mind being interrupted, so feel free to jump in, put your hand up if it comes back. So, right, so just at the top, just to explain, all of these are kind of dimensions where autism might manifest. So the last one was talking about kind of social cues, social interactions, communication. That can be one aspect. Another aspect we've got here is imagination, ideas, and creativity being reduced. Now, we need to be very careful with this, because I want to say straight off that actually that's a very two-dimensional way of looking at things. And just to preface it as well, people who experience autism tend to be more innovative in their ideas and be more creative in their ideas. So that's very misleading. We should change that. but that's just a title we've got in there. The reason why we have that there is that is what you will see if you use what we have as if you like, an environment that's designed for 98% of people, and you put someone who experiences autism in that environment. that's the kind of thing that will come out of it if you don't adapt it. You might see someone who seems to be unable to do that same creativity at that same speed or given that same structure. I will just talk through this. I know you shouldn't talk off slides, but just in case any of you can't see from the back. Sam, an adult with autism, is registered to compete at a regional event. Their heat is scheduled to take place at 2 p.m, but the event has been moved. They have now been placed in a heat with different athletes and in a different lane. When you let the athletes know the change, Sam doesn't look comfortable. Anyone want to just pop their hands up and say what might be the issue here for Sam? Was that just on the head?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any thoughts? Yeah.
I guess from especially from a track perspective, it's all about the schedule beforehand and how you warm up. And obviously that schedule for Sam has now changed potentially quite drastically, and that's causing him to be uncomfortable. I guess that the change to the routine and the disruption to his kind of pre-event preparation.
Yeah, very much so. And in some ways, we don't know what kind of anchors Sam might have on the event, where what relaxes him might be, for example, the person that's there, or knowing that 10 minutes before he's going to do this. So we don't know how we've affected the routine, but clearly what we've done could throw a lot of things up into the air. Yep.
It's also like in their mind, they've already emotionally and mentally prepared what's going to happen.
Yep.
So now that it's completely changed, they're completely thrown off guard, but they thought they were in control of, so that they keep them calm. It's completely gone out the window, so now they're sort of in that state of, well, what do I do now to get that control back and, prepare myself for whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose in some ways, we don't know how that presentation went. Was it just somebody saying, it's going to be a different time now, there's going to be different athletes, and it's going to be a different lane that you're competing in? Was that all thrown in just like that, and then the person walked away? Or was it done in a way in which some more information was given, just to provide some kind of comfort? That's a lot to deal with. So it may be, in a perfect world, just to jump ahead a little bit, that if there's been a change of time, that can be talked around. And if we have Sam and we know that he's got certain routines that are about what he'll do at certain times, maybe it's about talking to all the athletes and saying, what does that mean to you? Does that mean that you're going to be doing things an hour earlier, breaking it down than it was before? Nothing else will change other than that. I suppose we've got different athletes there. That might be okay. It might be that our Sam here knows a lot of the athletes, but at the moment he's been told that he's going to be going with unknown people. So I suppose it's about how we broach that information to make sure that it's not all thrown in such a way that it's so distressing. Yep. Sorry. You go first. And
yeah. All right. If you look at the individual, under these circumstances, you need to retrace, to stand back, and to give the individual the confidence to move forward. Stage by stage. It's all about learning and confidence, and frequently repetition.
Yep.
And to show them that they're able, to give them that encouragement.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe a lot of it is talking about the fact that this isn't a barrier.
No.
This is just a slight.
Sure.
Yeah, a slight tweak, and it doesn't mean too much. And I suppose doing it in quite a supportive way, where there's time to ask questions. I'm going to jump ahead a tiny bit here, but one of the big things that we do when trying to include people is sometimes we do too much. You all in your toolkits have got different ways that you can communicate information. Some of those may be verbally, some of it may be written, orthographic, some of it may be diagrams, some of it may be by doing a demonstration. Sometimes the danger can be that we throw, talking about that overload, sensory overload, we throw it all in there, and before Sam has had a chance to even start to process the time change, he's been told something else. So maybe it's about allocating more time. And maybe you all have heard of that whole ask twice thing. It's to do with mental health a lot too. In that often, you've all seen it, athletes ready at an event, and right, does everyone understand what we're going to do? Yes. And then you move away and everyone turns to each other and says, so what are we doing? And that's when we feel comfortable talking to each other, and that's when it's something that affects all of us. Whereas perhaps for Sam, that's a much bigger barrier. So, yeah.
Yeah, all I was going to make an observation. My daughter, who's also a competitive athlete, she has always, even from a young age, you know, she's 15 going on 16 now, even from a young age, if you said something was going to happen ABC, and all of a sudden at last minute it's ACB, absolute meltdown time. And even now when it's comps, if times change or anything, we as parents have to ensure that she has got the information that she needs in order to process it at her own speed, and in order to refocus. And it could be, you know, just if the time has changed, if it's gone forward, it's gone back. It's like you're saying about the routines, it's how does she then reset her own clock psychologically so she can go through what she needs to do as a competitive athlete to get to that. Very much the same, you know, with Sam. If something changes, it's ensuring that we as officials and as safeguarders of our athletes understand our athletes and their needs, and talking to them and understanding then if we have to tweak something, then the right people are informed that. So we're all dealing with a situation where differently abled people can compete in an equal manner.
Absolutely, and everyone who is impacted to the same degree. And I forget, because a lot of the time when we present these courses, we're talking about participation in sport. But of course, when we're talking about elite and performance, everyone's got a strict routine, haven't they? Everyone's got a very strict kind of preparation cycle that's going to be going through. So any change is going to be distressing. But I suppose we just recognise it's going to be even more heightened for someone who relies on that very granular routine, and they're going to be affected further by it. So I suppose that's why when we do have to change things, and that's a question, do we have to change things in that way? Is that part of a process that didn't consider these things? When we do change things, it's about making sure that we take into account those who need that extra time to process. And maybe it's about us offering a solution straight away, not saying, we'll let you know what the change is in 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a long time. Maybe it's about making sure that we manage the situation and we can present it all in a positive light, not in everything up in the air. What I'll do, we'll just have a quick look at some of the barriers there. I think we've probably hit all of those. Understanding, so I guess it's about giving a little bit more time, making sure that we ask twice if people understand. Routine disruption, understanding how that can have an effect on people, and of course within elite sport and with all levels of sport, that we understand. And then it's about anchors and points of reference, and it's understanding that for people it can be a very big change if the people that we're in, or the lane that we're in, changes. And I suppose my quick question throughout to all of you is that if there is going to be a lot of changes, talking about that person-centred approach, if you know that there's one person who's liable to be a lot more affected by that change, could you involve them in some of that conversation? When you're redrafting things, would they have to be in a different lane? Could you have them next to someone who is they're still going to compete with, that they normally compete with? How do we minimise the disruption? Because the other people aren't disrupted. It's not unfair on them. This person might be disrupted more. There's something that we can do about that. And then we've just got a few answers here. So, explain patiently, and sometimes that can mean an awkward silence. So it can mean giving a little bit more time for people to think about things before they answer. Do it in a reassuring way. Making sure that other athletes are aware that something might be distressing, in that if you think somebody has had everything thrown into the air and they might be quite distressed, having a lines person or having other coaches aware that that's taking place means that maybe they can offer a little bit of kind of comfort if suddenly something's happening, or they can let that person's coach know. If it were any other issue, I think that we would immediately talk to someone and say, this is happening for that person. It's about recognising those signs and not being uncomfortable about talking about it too. And then, last one really, just as we say, making sure that everyone understands what people's needs are, and that's just about increasing everyone's education. So, Imagination, ideas and creativity. Another aspect, just to kind of look on, is narrow range of interests, routines and repetitive behaviour. So sometimes this can be something that autism is linked to a great degree. And that people see it as being something that is very much around routine sometimes, and it can be something that you can see repetitive behaviours, which can be about coping, and it can be about bringing back control. We've got a little bit of a case study here. So Alice, a child with autism, regularly competes at local and regional events. Her coach, who is usually present at her event, is not there because they're attending to another athlete whose coach is injured. Alice is very distressed, upset, and refusing to take part in the event. So, for all of you, we've already touched on this. What's the barrier now? Why might there be a problem for Alice?
The routine has been disrupted.
And which part of the routine? You're absolutely right.
Yeah, who programmed. Preparation.
Yep. And somebody that she relies upon, her coach, not available, and there's somebody else. What could we do to try and provide some comfort, either at the time, or how could we try and prevent that? Will people always get injured? Will there be people calling in sick and people not available for their athletes?
You need a wider coaching structure to support her. In other words, someone else who she knows will go there when she knows that person is a direct subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of it is about familiarisation, in that if you've only got one coach in your routine, that can be a little bit of a house of cards, can't it? If that's someone that you rely on, and that's for any athlete. Whereas if you've got a team or a support network around you where people can jump in who are familiar, that means that perhaps you're able to kind of ride out these problems a lot more easily. So it may just be that in this example, you make sure that Alice has more contact with other coaches and that she's a little bit more familiar, so she's not coming from cold with an unfamiliar coach. From a performance point of view, hands up if you think it would be disruptive to have a different coach take you to an event, than your own coach. I'd probably again say, that could be quite disruptive for absolutely anybody. So when we know it's going to be more heightened for Alice, that's when we might put something in place beforehand. It may be that even if it's just an introduction, so that there is someone that she knows a little bit more, that's reducing some of that shock, isn't it?
Does this go back to the buddy system you mentioned earlier? About it wouldn't necessarily have to be familiarity with a coach, but to have that intermediary as the buddy to sort of make the introductions and smooth the path and everything else.
You are absolutely right. And in that, and I've just kind of talked about in a very two-dimensional, not really in a very realistic way, because actually it's not so much that the coaches change, it's because the person who's going to be with her at the point at which she competes is different. And that doesn't have to be a certain technical coach. It could be a friend, family member, a supporter. So yeah, making sure that there isn't this house of cards. You're not making sure that she always goes out with someone who might be there. Yeah, if there's someone who requires more in-person support, very relevant in COVID times, isn't it? When we think about hospitals and people being allowed access and things, when they need it more than others perhaps. Maybe that's something that we preempt, and maybe we look at our rules a little bit and we make more provision perhaps. Yep.
But equally, if there's a secondary coach that you want to make Alice, aware of and used to, surely that person, could remove the barrier completely. They could deal with the other person, and Alice could have a normal coach.
Yeah.
If you do have a secondary person.
Excellent point. So a little bit like when we had in that case study before, suddenly our athletes in a different lane with different people at a different time. Whereas it may be that whatever has disrupted our entire programme, and in this example, a coach not being well, we don't take Alice's coach. Quite right, yeah. So, and again, that's something to be said about not trying to fix a problem after it's already occurred. It's about trying to preempt the problem and perhaps changing some of our normal processes just so that we take things into account and don't create some of these awkward situations.
And it doesn't have to be a coach. You're talking about the support around the actual sort of individual. If these problems are communicated in this instance, say to officials in a sensitive way, then I think we can go a long way to accommodate the problem.
Yeah, quite so. And they do say that even in kind of exercise and physical activity, you shouldn't encourage people to always depend on someone, because in the moment that they're not available, it all falls apart. So, you know, why create this dependency when, you know, you can have that support network of people who all help Alice, you know, and they're all comfortable doing that. And it may be that you don't have the coach take such a hands-on role normally at events, such that there's not such an impact if their coach isn't available.
And in fact, within our operation, you know, we frequently, as officials, get parents or friends or people other than coaches, just to make the team aware. And if this can be encouraged, you know, it requires sensitivity on both sides, really.
Yep. And it requires us to look at how things are set up and challenge
Sure.
it. Yeah, which is, you know, something that we sometimes have to dedicate some time to do. And it's better than trying to put in a temporary response that will still be a temporary response in a year's time. Yeah. Right, so I'll just have a look, see if we've got all these. So we said that barrier here was that routine was changed. We're saying that Alice might not know what it means to have that different coach there. That could be quite disruptive, more distressing, and it could be that the communication kind of nervousness might come in there too. And then, yeah, we're seeing an emotional response, and that's why we're realising there's an issue here. And then we said as solutions, we've had for a little while there, familiarisation with who's there and event staff, secondary coaches, contingencies, but most of all planning for the situation, and that's stuff that you can do before, you know, as general policy or with Alice. Yep.
Sorry, this can you just pop that?
No, please.
In terms of Alice is very distressed and upset. Worst case scenario, if she was on the brink of having a meltdown or something, maybe you leave her be, because the worst you could do actually when an autistic person having a meltdown is approaching them, touching them, talking to them. It can actually make the situation worse.
Yep.
So if you do see them in that state, leave them until it's just calmed down a bit, and
Yep.
then just be a bit sensitive and careful in how you talk to them and how you approach them, because you don't want, especially when it's a person who's been quite about to have a meltdown and suddenly being bombarded, oh, you could have this, you could have that, we could do this for you. It's very even more overwhelming. It can make the situation much worse.
Yeah. And you've made a really, really good point there, which is that often if you see somebody exhibiting a distress behaviour in any circumstance, whether it might be related to autism or for any other reason, if they're showing distress and they, let's say they're leaving the venue, they're running out the room, the solution isn't always to immediately drag them back into the room. You know, because, you know, what if the environment is distressing on a very kind of simple level? And someone's coping routine or coping mechanism isn't something that you should take away from them, because you then, their control's been taken away and their structure's been taken away, so they then might move into something that's more familiar, maybe a coping behaviour. And then if you then intervene, you can make things a lot worse. Whereas, yes, if you, and I suppose there's a really good point there, which is about people understanding what someone's, I'm glad you brought that up, what someone's coping mechanism might be. In that it might be that our Alice, if things are overwhelming, what she needs is a timeout, and that might be 10 minutes in a certain environment. It might not have to be a very special environment. She needs that time, and maybe she needs that family member, or she needs that person to talk to them, not the officials. And then if you allow all that to happen, Alice is then fine to compete. So which then makes us think about what our structures are. Can we make sure that then Alice really is able to perform her coping mechanism and still take part? You know, might we have to show some flexibility to make sure that she isn't timed out or somehow, you know, knocked out because of a black and white crossing a line there? Yeah, really, really good point. Any questions on this one? Yep.
What's the best way of finding out? Because obviously everybody is different in how they cope and how they would want to be treated if they were, you know, find something distressing and overwhelming. And obviously maybe if it's a child with autism, there's a parent or a coach you could ask, but if it's a senior athlete or an adult, without sort of bombarding them at the start of the event, what are you going to, you know, I can't go up to them and say, what do I do if you have a meltdown? That's not a really, that's not a great way of approaching it, is
Yes.
it? And maybe you don't know until they're at the point of being distressed and upset,
Yep.
and then you also don't want to ask them then, because that again might bombard them, and you know it's kind of preemptively knowing it, but without knowing. It's really quite hard. How do you find that out?
You have to ask.
Well,
You have to give them the time. From experience, you give them the time to start to try and, as you say, you start to calm down initially, and then the only way is you have to ask in a caring way of what that person needs, and and try and gain the information. If there's no other way of getting the information, it's only from that person you need to ask them.
And usually coping mechanisms are quite physical, because we have just trouble describing how we feel verbally. Usually we show it physically, so sometimes it could be rocking, or even just shaking of the leg, or just fidgeting, or even just mumbling. Sometimes like just scratching on the arm. It usually comes out physically, so by then you can say, okay, something's not right, I'm going to leave them for like 10-15 minutes, and then when you come back and they seem a bit better in their normal state they were before, then that's a perfect time to come to them and say, look, is everything okay, what can we do, and something like that. So.
I think the problem. I mean, this is all quite new in the sense of something that's being rolled out. I know something's happening nationally, but there needs to be a lot more top-down structures, training. I mean, events should really have things like social wellbeing coordinators should be able to deal with this. So you have a couple of people who are designated who are trained to deal with such situations or recognise it. There needs to be things like you said, wristbands that people can recognise instantly what something might be or might have issues, without actually making it completely obvious. Or even actually at the point of registration, where it's registered at the point when an athlete is registered, it flags up in the system. So it just needs a lot more kind of structure and top-down coordination, really, to the point where it just becomes the norm rather than kind of an exception.
And I'll just come over in a second. It needs to be bottom up. And just my example about, us working in primary schools and working with kids, which we do, and, having them remove that stigma about disability, and having them open up and learn about, it is just, we say at the end of the course, if you can remember one thing, just ask. Just ask that person about it, because they will be the best person to go for it. But it's a really good point, because equally, on one hand, you want to ask that person, but on the other hand, talking about someone feeling ostracised, you don't want to have the Spanish Inquisition at the start of an event. So our processes need to catch these things and say, what are your needs? Are you vegetarian? Are you vegan? Do you have insulin? Do you need a certain arrangement if there's a distressing situation? Is there a kind of almost a care plan? And that's for mental health also. So.
You're right. I think registration should be a lot more data collected, especially medically as well, so people, what they know is actually happening on the track. But there also needs to be. One example of this, and it does conflict with, and it has caused some issues, is that obviously some people with autism, they need the noise. It can be very, very distracting, so we need noise cancelling headphones. But obviously that conflicts with.
You're jumping ahead on my slides here.
So that is a big issue that needs to be, that is just one thing that's one.
Very much so. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned here because we're all busy, especially the officials, and we've all dealt with stress situations with athletes. Yeah, we identify when they're under stress, and I've done that on a regular basis. But unless Alice is the network engages with Welsh Athletics Network at some point prior to the competition, we are not going to be looking for that specific athlete and put anything in place to deal with that. We're stretched as it is, so we will only ever identify it when we see symptoms, and that's too late, especially in competition terms, because when you've got an athlete on the track ready to start a race, you haven't got 10 minutes. That race is going to go to a time.
Yep.
So there's a lot of development in this area if you think we're going to be able to address this, because the people on the ground who's actually running the competition will not have the time as it is at the moment. We can only deal with symptoms at that time. So I just want to bring that point.
The structures need to be put in place by the time you get to a track. It's Yeah. Everything's presented there for you, you know, so that's just going to take time to do that, you know, so yeah, it's a fast moving event, as we all know, but you know, that information needs to be at hand straight away rather than sometimes literally on the day.
Yeah, and it's a fast moving environment, and we need to be proactive, not reactive. And I suppose that's the case if we have policies in place where we know exactly what to do if someone needs something, and we know exactly what to do if someone needs 10 minutes at the start of a race and we've got a contingency there, then it becomes more possible. But I guess it's that proactive, taking that step back, planning, and people have to feel comfortable announcing if they have needs, and that has to go into the system. Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps this is for the Welsh athletics people here then, but sometimes when you go to the meetings, it's very strictly kind of parents on the outside of the barrier, athletes in the middle, coaches in the middle. Certainly with our shop, but he would have been much more comfortable going up there with his mother or his father during the competition. But we didn't do that because we thought we'd cause trouble. But perhaps that might have been the better way to make that athlete comfortable. But I'm not even sure how the people running the competition would have taken that as get back to the end.
If I jump in really quickly, I mean, I suppose a lot of this is about a risk assessment. It's looking at everyone, what everyone's needs are, and I suppose it's making sure that if having someone there to support you is the only way to achieve the outcome that needs to be achieved. And I suppose it might come from there. So I suppose maybe it's about looking at everything that we could do that would have that outcome, perhaps. And then if it really is a disadvantage, if it is unfair, that's perhaps when a kind of strict policy might have to be looked at. I don't know.
But if we go back to Lee's whole situation, because I think I was there.
Yeah, you were.
He was aware. He was able to make other officials aware. There was nothing untoward or strange about him actually participating. And in this instance, I think the team concerned were very sensitive.
It was excellently handled, actually.
To the need. So we're back to sensitivity. But the other thing I just wanted to explore with you was, if we have the right support people around, frequently they will know the triggers as to, why this might occur, and whether it's change in the sequencing of events or something externally that's happened, because we can't divorce that. But this is why communication across the board, is so important. But in that particular instance, it worked because you had knowledge that you were able to communicate. I don't think he felt out of place at all, and he experienced success.
Yeah, it could have gone either way, but it did in that case. Yeah, good example.
Well, that's a prime example of where having that information up front would have removed some of the issues, because if the officials had known that this athlete needs, mum or dad or whatever in the kind of closer support area where the coaches are, that could have been handled up front and not being seen as he gets his mum there, why can't I have my mum there? And it could have been handled. I wasn't there for that event, but that's something that knowing the information up front would really help.
Yeah, preempt it and try and stop all of these secondary problems coming up.
And it's the kind of thing that should be asked in terms of, do you need any accessibility arrangements as part of registration for events? And last thing I'll say, I'll have to move on because we're going to run out of time for all of you. So, but I suppose it's about educating everybody, and that's why it's so important for everyone to be aware. And of course, athletes don't have time perhaps to know all of your policies, and they can be. That's not possible. However, on the day, someone should know that somebody is a diabetic and has certain medication somewhere. That could be good as general knowledge in case there's something that happens in the changing room or somewhere else. In that same way, somebody should know if there's someone who has an additional need. And all we do to some extent is create stigma sometimes if we try and manage that situation in a way that's very diplomatic. It depends on the person, but if we ask the person and they're comfortable to tell it, that can go some way to defusing it, certainly. I'll just jump on because we've got a couple more to go through. But I actually think we've covered a lot of these in what we've already said, so I'm just going to
summarise this really. We've got somebody who's come to a venue and they're being given gestural information. You know, there's a point going on here. So they're saying, where do I start on the track? And an official is telling them, right, just after the bend, over there, and they're pointing. The person's looking confused, they're not making eye contact, and they're being a bit quiet. What's the barrier here? Pass it over to you guys.
Well, there's 2 bends for a starter, so...
Yes, I thought you meant my PowerPoint. Yes, yeah. So it's ambiguous. In that same way that with autism and with non-native English or non-native any other language, it can be very unhelpful sometimes to use language such as break a leg, analogies, things like that. So being very specific is very helpful. So to say on that corner by that marker, for example, could be very helpful. But yeah, clearly it's about perhaps understanding here. I'm going to jump forward a little bit here. What could you do to try and help this person? We've got Rachel here. How can we help Rachel so that she comes out of this situation where she doesn't really know what to do? Yep.
I guess it'd be walking them to the location.
Yep.
And yeah, they can see exactly where.
Absolutely. And as one of our suggestions here, which I wrote on there, so this isn't Disabilities for Wales, we had drawing a map or having something like that, and that could definitely be a solution. But if you've got somebody available to walk somebody there, of course that's a more personable and human approach, because then you're taking away that barrier. You're taking them straight there. They're not having to try and do orienteering as part of your event. So I'll just pop through to just in case you've got any kind of questions about any of these. So sorry, that text one was another slide, so I should be okay with that. So gestures, they can be quite ambiguous. So in other words, using verbal communication, leading somebody there, that can be a far more helpful way to go. Our last aspect to have a look at is sensory, and that's to do with that very loud sound. It's to do with those bright lights. It can be to do with touch, being sensitive to touch, things like that. Vibration, for example. So we've got Charlotte, who's a child with autism, competing in a sprint event at a schools competition. The teacher has informed you that Charlotte is sensitive to loud noises, which in turn can cause discomfort, leading to Charlotte not taking part in a race. So we have been told, which is helpful, right, in advance, that Charlotte might have a bad reaction, might have a bad experience if she has loud noises. What are we going to do? What's our concerns that might happen here? Anybody? By the way, before we go forward, last slide, I promise. So.
The first thing I do is put Charlotte in lane 8.
Okay, yep.
Start with.
Okay.
I've had this in the Invictus Games where they didn't want us to use live ammo, and it had happened that we had to go to live ammo. So literally, we've got all the competitors who were going to compete. They were all in one area, and we introduced them to the gun, the noise, etc. prior to the event, and made sure that everybody was happy with that before actually going into the competition.
Right, brilliant. So we're taking away that ambiguous, unknown element. So we're helping somebody plan. Yeah, absolutely. That could be a way to go. Yeah. Anybody else? What might we be able to do to try and make this a little bit better for Charlotte? Because nothing's happened yet. It might all be absolutely fine for her, but any equipment that might help her maybe.
Headphones.
Who was that say?
Headphones.
Yeah, headphones. It may be, as permitted, that she has her own headphones that she can wear, which are noise cancelling, which she's still going to hear it. Perhaps going to lane 8, perhaps other considerations. That's going to make it better for her. And then she understands why these things are being done as well. She's not moving into lane 8 for no reason. We don't have too much time, so I'm just going to pop onto this. So the little bullet points I put on here are other athletes. So for the other athletes, if they know that it might be quite distressing for her, it might be quite useful, because then they can kind of give her some comfort or reassure her in that kind of very human way. So, if something is a concern for someone and you're aware of it, you can tell someone if something's wrong before things start. I mean, that's something that everyone would do, even competitively. Crowd, for example, you can imagine that you might, if you were planning ahead and things, you might make actually people aware in the crowd that actually, this isn't a time to make unexpected noises. It should be, it might be something you think, oh, a crowd's not going to do that. But we need to get to a time where society is considerate, where actually it's known by people that people have different needs. We've got starting gun and the processes, and that was a wonderful process there, kind of giving someone an orientation as to what exactly is going to happen, so there is nothing unknown about what's coming. And then PPE, for example, having headphones or personal protective equipment, making sure that people know in advance perhaps that they're allowed to bring that, because there's always that case of, what if I'd known? That would have been great for Charlotte. So maybe it's us about breaking down what's going to happen, such that people can then query if they think it's going to be a problem in advance. And so yeah, transparency of process, letting them know what we're going to do. Is it going to be live rounds, for example? What we can do pre-event, generally making sure that everyone's aware what Charlotte might have a problem with, what she might have an issue with. Thanks everybody. I just want to finish by just kind of saying, black box thinking, that's just the process really of looking at what goes wrong in a situation, and then us not saying, oh well, that could have been improved, and then forgetting until next year and it repeats. So I suppose it's about us taking a bit of an iterative approach to say, right, that happened, how can we formalise that and how can we improve it next time? So that's something that we're all doing to try and make things more inclusive, because of course everything is set up in a way that isn't necessarily that way. And then that functional approach, trying to kind of focus on what people can do and then building from there. And a lot of that is about asking the athlete, what they need and making them feel comfortable giving their needs. And then being brave, and us all taking a part and getting rid of that stigma, because if we find it awkward to take somebody over to a place and introduce them about a certain problem, what are we saying about the issue? We're saying it's something that we feel a bit awkward about, not everyone will understand. If somebody wants things to be discreet in a certain way, that's absolutely great. But if someone doesn't feel like it's outside of the normal processes to do processes that make things more comfortable for them, that will improve things in the long term for absolutely everybody. So where we can, just being very direct about what we want to do. Do any of you have any questions before we finish up? So my email is there if you've got any questions. You can get in touch with Disability Sport Wales, but a lot of these case studies as well you can find on the Autism Wales website, and they do have training within Autism Wales that you can do in order to learn how to accommodate people better. So do check that out as a resource, and there is a PowerPoint you can download from Autism Wales that has an expanded version of what we have here. Thank you. You've all been okay.